are here to debate the truth of this statement. Resolved. Non-discrimination laws should take precedence over religious liberty. And I'm just going to mention that if somebody runs over their time, I'll be timing you. And I have a couple of ways. I have a old person's gavel here, which I may start showing you as an indication on the screen that you're running low on time. Or I may play this sound. And so those will be the indications to wrap up. So now I'm going to call this debate to order. And I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. So that means somebody who agrees with the resolution. And our first four speakers have already been chosen. Our first speaker is Alistair MacLeod. Alistair, please go ahead and give your 4-minute speech or less. Alistair, you're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. There we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I've considered it a privilege to participate. I need to apologize and explain that I'm going to have to leave somewhat early from the gathering because of a scheduling conflict. But with all that, I will plunge in. This question, I believe, has at its heart the interpretation of the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. I do not think that when the founders wrote that amendment, they were contemplating the kind of litigation that we face today. The amendment reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What the founders were worried about was the tyranny of the state over the minds of individuals. They lived in a world in which the power of government to legislate matters of conscience was a subject of deep concern. It is no accident that in a single primary statement of fundamental rights, they bundled religious liberty together with freedom of expression. They wanted to bar the state from telling anyone what to think, what to believe, or how, when, or where to express those thoughts and beliefs. What they really had in mind was what centuries later George Orwell described as thought crime. We now face a proposition that would have struck the founders as deeply paradoxical, that the exercise of one freedom from the tyranny of the state could license the abridgment of some other freedom from that tyranny. When, for example, the exercise of religion is held to include the withholding of certain privileges from sexual minorities, we have exactly that kind of contradiction. No founder ever thought that one person's right to exercise his or her religious beliefs could conceivably extend to the curtailment of another person's expression of his or her sexuality. Religious liberty was about what one thought and believed, not about what one could tell someone else to do. The reason I would argue that non-discrimination laws should take precedence over religious liberties, as our resolution puts it, is that the First Amendment simply does not contemplate a conflict between the two. To put it bluntly, the idea that religious liberty could ever justify constitutionally forbidden discrimination is a perversion of one of the most powerful principles on which our system of government is based, the freedom to be what you are.
Beautifully timely, beautifully timely. Jazz hands for our first speaker,
Thank
the
you.
first person who had the courage to step forward. Questions. Please use the raised hand function to ask questions. And also, of course, you can go through your whip to make sure that I know that you want to ask a question. But right now, I am going to go by what I see as the first raised hands. And I see Keith Long in Florida. Keith, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I would be pleased to hear from the speaker the legal basis for his conclusion in support of the resolution. Everybody can have their own perspective of socially whether it's they favor non-discrimination over religious liberty, but in terms of the Constitution specifically, where would he go? There have been the Civil Rights Law, Mr. Chairman, in 1964. There have been the Masterpiece Cake decision more recently. So I'd like to hear him address, Mr. Chairman, those issues.
Thank you. And by the way, I would like to commend you. The very first question was actually a question. So, Alistair, would you like to respond to the question?
I'll do my best, but I did not have time to prepare my legal thinking as deeply as I would like to have. I'm certainly familiar with what the gentleman is referring to, Mr. Chair. But as far as legal justification, I presented the best I could. I think that the justification lies in the wording and intent of the First Amendment.
Okay, thank you very much. And so now I'm looking for another question. And Kevin McAvoy, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to commend Alistair for a very well worded and put together presentation. The question I have, Mr. Chair, has to do with social mores. In the time of the founders, what is today normal was in their time aberrant. So why would the speaker think that today's social views apply to the founders' thinking?
May I respond?
Absolutely.
Of course, you're absolutely right. They were living in a very different world from ours, especially with regard to sexual behavior. But I believe that their intent was to give us liberty and never impose our ideas of liberty on someone else's liberty. So the general principle applies no matter how drastically the, as you put it, the social mores have changed, because indeed they have changed radically.
Thank you. Thank you. And what a commendable round of speech, people actually asking true questions and brief and to the point answers. Exemplary, absolutely exemplary. Thank you so much. We will now move to our first speaker in the negative, and Andrew Graham. Please unmute yourself and give your speech of up to 4 minutes.
Well, this is my first Braver Angels debate, so I want to thank the organizing committee for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to address this group. Let me begin with the history of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is, of course, Title VII of that act that creates the anti-discrimination regime that applies at the federal level. And of course, it prohibits discrimination on a number of protected classes, including race, sex, gender, ethnicity, and so forth. Let me begin with something that is a historical development since 1964 that makes that act really no longer a sensible idea, whether in the context of religious freedom or in the context of freedom generally. The act, of course, was enacted against a backdrop of invidious racial discrimination across the American South in particular. It was meant to prohibit a Black family traveling from Atlanta to Memphis to not be able to receive food, shelter, entertainment on such a journey. That, however, is a very different world than the world we have today. Today, we have a world in which there are vastly competitive markets. And in that time, now that there are really no places here in the United States where people of color or people of sexual orientation and gender identity can't receive service from somewhere. In the light of that, I submit that the entire anti-discrimination regime should be dismantled in the furtherance of political freedom in this country. This idea was developed by Professor Richard Epstein at NYU Law School and has some traction in legal circles, particularly in libertarian circles. Next, I'd like to turn to the Constitution itself. Of course, the First Amendment, which was admirably quoted a moment ago, provides for the free exercise of religion. It is a separate and independent right, not collapsible in freedom of association or freedom of assembly or freedom of speech. It is indeed historically be considered the first freedom and a fundamental human right from which all other fundamental human rights flow. And that's why it is free exercise, meaning the ability to not just believe and worship, but to live according to one's faith in pursuit of the truth, as we are doing here. The idea that the government can impose anti-discrimination regimes on freedom of religion, I think, is anathema to the First Amendment and is an overweening use of government power tending toward the type of tyranny the founders were very afraid of. Next, let me just mention some ideas with respect to the types of discrimination that we do see. And for example, in a case like Masterpiece Cake Shop, poor Mr. Jack Phillips there in Lakewood, Colorado, has been in litigation for years for refusing to bake a custom wedding cake for a same-sex couple. That to me is not exactly a way to build goodwill between people of faith and people who are participating in kind of a new sexual and gender identity issues. So I think that is a real problem. In fact, I wish people would come to a venue like this and exhibit the type of goodwill that people are exhibiting here. I think we would have fewer of these cases if people would exhibit this type of goodwill. I also want to say, in the end, most of these types of harms are framed in the issue of dignitarian harms or third-party harms of sexual orientation and gender identity. But those cases often omit the dignitarian harms to people of faith from living according to their sincerely held religious beliefs. So dignitarian harms do not provide any purchase, legally speaking, for overcoming First Amendment values.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And jazz hands for our speaker. And so looking for questions for the speaker. And I see Joel. Joel, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
I happen to agree with the previous speaker, and I oppose the first speaker who is claiming that the bakery shop owner has the right to force the bake shop owner to deal with him. Now, that's besides being completely against basic human liberties for the bake shop owner, constitutional liberties. Where is it saying in the Constitution or anywhere that that person who wanted a cake for himself has any right whatsoever to anything in that bake shop?
Joel, let me just pause you. For whom is your question?
It's for the Alistair.
Okay, I'm really sorry about that. And this happens pretty frequently, that somebody really wants to ask a question of a prior speaker. And I'm really sorry that we can't accommodate that. But there is a way for you, which is to sign up as a speaker yourself. So let your whip know that you want to be a speaker. And that's the way to get in what you want. Mark, please unmute yourself and ask your question. Mark?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. To the best of my knowledge, the human heart has not changed in the past century or so. Why does the speaker believe that removal of these laws would not return to the same situation that existed before their passage?
Great, clear, concise question. Would the speaker like to respond?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Simply put, I think invidious discrimination that was such an issue in this country in the civil rights era, I think that era is way behind us culturally. Obviously, culture changes, and we've seen massive changes in culture toward the acceptance of alternative lifestyles. And therefore, I think it's emblematic that culture changes. I think culture in America is way beyond where it was in 1964. And as I said, I believe now it is virtually nowhere in this country would an African-American family be denied service in a hotel or a restaurant. And in light of that, these anti-discrimination regimes simply don't make sense anymore.
Thank you. And so I'm going to take one more question for this speaker. Lenny Rothbart, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask the last speaker what he feels the legal resolution should be in a case where there's sort of a conflict of interests within the requirements of the Constitution. In other words, what if someone's religion requires that he impose the rules of his religion on people who don't subscribe to the religion? Then what do you do?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I would be
Good question.
grateful if you would provide an example. It's a very abstract hypothetical.
An example would be well, there are better examples than the baker, but since you brought this up, he's imposing the rules of his religion on these prospective customers. Others might be restaurants. I mean, if he can do that, can't a restaurant refuse to admit them?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think you've given examples. Thank you.
Yeah, the answer simply is no. And legally speaking, Mr. Phillips refused to politely bake a custom wedding cake. It is not a denial of service case in the tradition of we don't serve your kind here in the American South. So the factual scenario you've constructed is factually inaccurate with respect to the Massachusetts cake shop case. And there is no law in this country that allows, no court in this country that would allow an African-American to not be served. And also in that particular case, Mr. Phillips offered to sell any particular good in his entire store to that particular couple. He used his artistic talents to bake them a custom wedding cake. So with all due respect, your factual scenario is mistaken.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Just a couple of notes before we move on to the next round of speakers. So one, let me remind people that we really do appreciate personal stories and anecdotes. I notice, that this debate is kind of getting a little bit legalistic, and so let me just nudge you in that direction for future speakers. And also, I'm going to request the whips. Whips, I would like you to suggest to me who might be good questioners. And, questioners, please converse with the whips. So I'm not just going by whoever puts their hand up first. I would prefer to operate in that way differently a little bit. So, and I'd kind of like to see this thing lighten up a little bit. It's feeling kind of heavy to me. Just my preference. Okay. So now we're going to our next round, and our next speaker in the affirmative is Roy Stillman. Roy, please unmute yourself and give your 4-minute speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am speaking on behalf of the resolution. And first, let me say I believe in religious liberty. It is a basic concept of freedom in our way of life. But what does religious liberty really mean? To me, well, a definition that I read recently states that religious liberty is the freedom to believe and exercise or act upon religious conscience with unnecessary interference by the government. I agree with that definition, But with regard to the resolution being debated tonight, I would add the following. It is not just the freedom to practice one's religion that we are concerned with, but also to not be discriminated against when it affects our inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. My uncle, who was Jewish, was free to practice his religion, but he could not be a doctor because med schools wouldn't discriminated against him at the time he applied. My grandfather could not live in the location in the town that he chose to live in because of discrimination against peaceable people of his faith, redlining. And I still can't join certain clubs because of my faith. My uncle became a successful dentist. My grandfather moved to another part of the town, and I joined the club that offered more diversity among faiths. But these were all dictated choices by prejudice. Obstacles had to be overcome that shouldn't have existed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? Not really, if the best education is withheld and the best business networks you can't join. So protect my freedom of religion, but protect me from discrimination because of it. Religious liberty is worthless without protection from discrimination due to one's religion. So I ask you, should anti-discrimination laws take precedence over religious liberty? I see an analogy to the right of free speech. One cannot yell fire in a crowded theater unless, of course, there's an actual fire. So we can infringe upon certain rights. Likewise, we can have non-discrimination laws to protect those who want to practice their religious faith openly and without consequence to their inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Draft these laws carefully with an eye to protecting religious freedom, but draft them to prevent state-supported discrimination against those who practice their religion. Government must, at the very least, provide equal protection and a level playing field for those of any faith, and not just side with those who say we have religious privity to practice our faith. But it comes with one arm twisted behind our backs to withhold our inalienable rights.
Thank you. Thank you. So, looking for questions for this speaker. And if you have your hand up inadvertently or for something from the past, I would ask you to please lower it. Make sure that the hands that are up are for people who want to ask questions of this speaker. And Mark Allen Lewis, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
You did already?
Yes, thank you very much. It seems somewhat ironic that the speaker is supporting the amendment, and the examples that he gave were examples of discrimination against him based on religion. These laws appear to be, they're called anti-discrimination, but they are in fact discriminatory laws. It seems odd to me, how does an example in which religious discrimination occurred support his position? Thank you.
Would the speaker care to address that question?
No, I think it speaks for itself.
Okay, that's the answer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for another questioner. And Kevin McAvoy, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And once again, Mr. Stillman, a very well said argument. The question I have regards the clubs that pick and choose who's allowed to join them. Mr. Chair, wouldn't you say that the ultimate revenge against those clubs is to join another club and make it the club of choice? If the first club you wish to join is the best at drawing business and relationships in the community, wouldn't the best revenge be to make that second club the better option for everyone?
Yeah, and what would the speaker have to say to that?
I think that's a great revenge, but I'm 74 now, and I don't know when that revenge is really going to actually take place. I'll give the example of Rose Kennedy, who could not join a club because a prestigious club in Palm Beach because she was a Catholic. So she chose to join a Jewish club, which had been built because the Jews could not join the Catholic, the club that she couldn't get into. That's fine, but Rose Kennedy is not typical of what most of us have to live in our lives in terms of their wealth and connections and things like that. And most of us want to have an opportunity to at least play on a level playing field. And I think that's the case that I'm supporting.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. And we will now move on to our last previously scheduled speaker, Cynthia King, in the negative. Cynthia, please unmute yourself and give your 4-minute speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I am from Ohio, and for context, I am an independent. I do not lean either Democrat or Republican, though I have friends that go both ways. My arguments are not based on religious doctrine. I have worked for civil rights since I was 11 years old, and I'm an economist who cares about the implications of decisions we make. America was founded at a time when we had just fought a war and were now being asked to pay for that war. It had gone on for 4 centuries between the French and the English over whose view of God wins. Ironically, America had at that point pretty much given up on forced state religion, and the founders wanted to cast in cement that there would be no forced religion and no persecution of any religion, because many people were not so much fighting to force their religion on someone else, but out of fear that they would be persecuted if the other side won. Some would say religion, after 400 years of fighting, should be feared. But I read a lot of anthropology, and there is not a culture, every culture currently existing or in the past has some sort of view that there is something bigger than us, some purpose to life besides eat, poop, procreate, and die. Suppressing religion completely was tried by Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, and we know that they were murderers and not someone we want to emulate. In this country, if you do not like my church or my mosque or my dancing under the full moon, you do not need to participate. However, if I am required to hide or deny my religion, then that means that I don't really have freedom of religion. I also believe in freedom of speech, and that includes the freedom not to speak. I am a Quaker, and I do not swear oaths. You cannot make me swear oaths or say something that I believe is untrue. And if my freedom to assemble includes the government telling me who I must assemble with, then my freedom of assembly is meaningless. We have gone to a society where disagreement is called hate speech, and the sort of implied right that everybody has to like you. And that's not going to happen. But even more, it trivializes real rights. I was brought up with the idea that my right to swing my arm ends at your nose. So I want to bring up one of the examples that has not been brought up before, was a woman who worked in a county office and refused to provide marriage certificates to gay people. I believe she should have quit out of conscience or been fired. She was acting paid to be a representative of a government and carrying out government policy for all the people in that county, not simply the ones in her religion. On the other hand, I believe that the wedding cake situation was a matter of attempting to force speech. Nobody has a right to a wedding cake by this particular baker, and it trivializes rights to do this. I believe he was using government to persecute this person. On the other hand, we have to have a balance. We have to have a balance between recognizing that religion is important and it serves a function, and that we need for people to be able to see this. If this was a situation of a church being the only gatekeeper if the Catholic Church owned all the medical schools in America, then that would be an important thing to reconsider. But as a general rule, I believe that it is quite possible to allow people to practice their religion without, well, anyway, I think I said what I meant to say. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And so looking for questions for the speaker. And I see Angie Watson Hajim. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I want to ask the speaker, she mentioned the woman who refused to give the marriage licenses to gay couples. And she felt that that was definitely wrong because this woman was acting as an agent, as an employee of the government that she worked for. I want to just ask the speaker, how would she deal with the situation if a private owner, a landlord of a property, had a rental available to rent, and a gay couple came to look at that apartment wanting to rent that particular apartment? It fit their price range, it was perfect for them, they wanted it. And the landlord, the property manager, told this couple, I'm sorry, it's against my sincere religious beliefs to not have people living in sin who are gay living in my property. What would the speaker think about that kind of a situation?
Speaker, please feel free to answer that question.
Thank you. I would have no problem with telling the landlord, they're not asking you to live with them, are they? If we go back to the cake thing, he didn't refuse to sell them any kind of cake. He simply refused a form of speech that would have denied what he believed. So for me, again, the landlord isn't being asked to live with you. He's not being asked to marry you. You could be two people who are two male roommates or two female roommates, and what else happens between those people in the apartment they rented is none of the landlord's business. In fact, at least in Ohio, a landlord cannot enter a rental property without 24 hours warning. So I see no problem with protecting someone's right to rent a unit in that situation.
Asked and answered. Asked and answered. Len Breslow, please unmute yourself and ask your question of the speaker.
Okay, well, Mr. Chair, I'm curious that neither this speaker nor any of the others has brought up the issue of the 15th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law. And really, so I'd like to know how she thinks that applies or doesn't to this issue, and really how any of the other speakers think about that, the 15th Amendment.
Well, again, the format of this is that only the current speaker answers questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question. Would the speaker care to address that question?
I guess I would like him to explain the question a little more clearly. I think that my position certainly involves equal protection under the law.
Okay, well, I think that sounds like a pretty good answer. And maybe why don't we leave it in that instead of getting into a lot of crosstalk, which really doesn't fit into this format. So our last speaker is thanked, as are the questioners. And so now we will move into non-prearranged speakers. And I'll be alternating affirmative and negative. And by the way, also, I would like to say that within this structure, if you have a nuanced position that neither clearly falls into affirmative or negative, but actually a reframe of the question. In this kind of function, that is greatly welcomed. And I often look for that kind of a position. But so that said, Alana Roberts, please unmute yourself. And you have up to 4 minutes, although I encourage you, if you can be more concise, to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this prompt illuminates for me is the confounding yet expected reality that we as Americans make these constitutional rights that we all have mutually exclusive when they should be symbiotic. Why I believe this is a continued conversation is that we are failing as a society to educate through our social and academic means to address the perpetuation of white supremacy in religion and more specifically in Christianity. So let's not mince words. Christianity has historically been weaponized to further the myth of race, to colonize other parts of the world, has been used to enslave people, has been used to vilify and dehumanize the LGBTQ plus community. And if even none of that rings true for you, the fact that we as Christians have the imagery of a white Jesus with silky long hair, when in Revelations 1:15, Jesus has skin of bronze and hair of wool, should tell you that the proliferation of Christianity was not just about sharing the gospel, but of the power structure that comes with having the resources afforded by having a white race and white influence. And I always come back to the baker, as we say, that went all the way to the Supreme Court to not make a wedding cake for a same-sex couple. Last time I checked, he was in the cake making business and not the saving your soul or religious business, which meant the service the couple went to get had nothing to do with his own personal views. I always say my moral extents are not the standard for which everyone else should live their life. To me, that is the essence of what the founders meant by saying we have the freedom to practice religion, which also means we have the freedom to not practice religion. And to the previous speaker, Mr. Graham, who seems to, in my opinion, resonate with Senator Tim Scott's sentiments that America has somehow progressed from a racist country, I would like to say that racism, prejudice didn't start during the Civil Rights Movement or start during Jim Crow. And that doesn't just go away because we had a Black president or passed some laws, especially when you can still see to this day the pervasive segregation in our schools, neighborhoods, and churches due to redlining and predatory loaning, as well as the epidemic of mass incarceration and police brutality that wreak havoc on low-income and Black and Brown communities. And lastly, I will say non-discrimination should be the umbrella under which we all exist and coexist. So if there is to be a catch-all that needs to be prioritized, it needs to be non-discrimination that we all can exercise. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you. I see that as a courageous speech, and I want to commend you for your courage. And I am looking for, are there any questions? Are there any questions for this speaker? And so far,
I have a question.
Jonathan Jenkins, I believe, Jonathan Jenkins, do you have a question for the speaker?
Yes, sir, Chair. I want to start off, Sir Chair, by stating I agree with majority of what the previous speaker said. I myself am a Christian. I'm a firm believer that I should not put my views on people, or that I should not judge, because it's not my place to judge. That's God's place to judge up above. So I'm for gay marriage, all that stuff. That being said, I would ask of the previous speaker that at what point does one person's views supersede another person's views? And at what point does, because forcing someone to act against even though he's a cake maker, you're making him do something that's against what he stands for. And so at what point is it okay that one person's views supersede another's, or that one person's, basically that's my question, sorry.
Yeah, would the speaker please like to unmute and answer that question?
So I agree, there should be no win or lose in this situation. I think that's the problem, is that we become a victor and a victim in the situation. It's not that the cake maker was being told that you have to suppress your religious views to make this cake. It was the service that the gay couple went to get that was then denied to them because of their sexuality, which had nothing to do with the business the cake maker was in. So again, it's not a win or lose. I don't get to exercise my religious freedom because I'm making this cake. It is, we are a symbiotic organism where your sexuality can coexist with my business. And I don't have to infringe upon your right to a cake, and you don't have to infringe upon my right to not agree with your lifestyle.
Thank you. Thank you. And Roy Stillman, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. I would like to ask the speaker, can they imagine a situation where religious liberty would take precedence over non-discrimination law?
I'm sure the more experienced speakers who come after me and before me can manifest an idea of that. But like I said in the bottom of my speech, I believe non-discrimination is the umbrella and the catch-all that all our other rights exist upon and coexist. So if the task of exercising your religious freedom, which also means to not exercise religion at all, comes at a cost of not having non-discrimination laws, then that is not really exercising a freedom. That is a conditionality. And as a Christian, I believe anything that comes with a condition is not the true love of God and should not exist. So if anything, if our rights have conditions, then they are not really rights. They are conditional.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. And I want to commend the courageous person to be the first non-arranged spontaneous speaker, and the questioners as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now going to our next non-pre-scheduled speaker, Kevin McAvoy. Please unmute yourself and speak for 4 minutes or less.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And if I can just applaud Alana Roberts, what a well-reasoned and stated argument. That was beautiful. But I stand in defense of religious liberty. The freedom of religion is not the same as a freedom from religion. A person's personal beliefs and lifestyle do not entitle them to impose on others who have truly held religious beliefs. In the same way that it is unconscionable for any person to walk into someone's home and tell them how to live, it is inappropriate for any person to walk into a church or a business and tell them how they must operate. You cannot tell a Catholic hospital that they must perform abortions. You cannot tell a Christian church that they must perform gay weddings. These are holy moments. Now, I wholeheartedly believe the government does not belong in religion in any way. I don't care who gets married. If you build a home, who you build that home with is of no concern to me. If you have children, raise them well. If you pay taxes, pay them annually. That is not what it concerns. It should not concern our religious people. But in the same way that I truly believe that I should not dictate what happens in someone's home, I believe that no one should dictate what happens in a church or a holy place or even in someone's place of business. Now, obviously, there are limitations. As was said earlier, a landlord should not discriminate against who lives in his apartments. But if you are renting a room in your home, that's a very different standard. Who you let live in your home is very different than who rents an apartment from you. And so I believe that there are levels of proximity. And it is without regard if the church that we attend is the most beautiful wedding venue in a 100-mile radius. If you do not subscribe to our religious views, then you do not have access to that building. Now, if that church makes their building open to anyone besides those who subscribe to their religious beliefs, then they must open that venue to everyone who does not subscribe to their religious beliefs. If you make it a business, if you make it commercial, okay, then, and you break down your own barriers, then you don't get to pick and choose. But if you have limits, as many Catholic churches do, that only those who are members of that church and in good standing can be married in that venue, then I think that is a truly held religious belief, and it must be respected with the same level of defense that we cover anti-discrimination laws. And I think Alana said it beautifully, that anti-discrimination is the umbrella under which all of these things should be viewed evenly. I think that is a good way for it to be said.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm looking for questions for the speaker. And Paula Lynn, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
So I'm happy that he brought up the limits not being discriminatory. Once you say allow one group of people into your church, then you have to allow others. I guess that applies to where I'm coming from with what I think is key to this issue is behavior versus identity. So if you decide that someone can't rent your property or can't have a wedding cake based on their behavior that is against your religion.
So Paula, let me nudge you in the direction of asking a question.
Yeah, I'm asking if that's what Kevin means, because then I have a way of agreeing. I've been trying to get my arms around what I'm thinking, and I'm trying to see if anyone else agrees with it. It's about behavior that we're discriminating against, not identity.
And so then I believe that's your question then to Kevin. Is it about behavior rather than identity?
I guess I can leave it at that. I don't think that's clear. See what Kevin says.
So I am an elder in our church. I'm also a political figure in our area. And I think that what you're asking is a vital question. If a church intends to discriminate against anyone for their sin, if that's what we're going to call it, then you discriminate against everyone for their sin. If you're a gambler, if you cheat on your wife, no matter what those things are, then none of you can come to our church. If, however, you honestly want people to come to God and know your faith, let them come in without regard for what their past sins are, what their behaviors are. It does not mean you condone their behaviors. I think if that cake maker were asked to make a cake for a poker night and he objected, I think that's reasonable. If he was asked to make one for a biker club and objected, that would be reasonable. And if he uses that same standard to say that I would not make one for a gay marriage, then I think he is being consistent. If you don't keep a straight, hard line, then you can't impose on a single group and not others. I think Paul has a great question.
Thank you. Thank you. And so Samantha, please unmute yourself and ask your question of the speaker.
Yep. Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. My question for the speaker is, what do you believe when a religious institution takes money from the government in the form of government loans, or not necessarily even loans, but grants? Do you believe that because this faith-based organization is using federal funds in some sense, that they are under the guise of the federal guidelines versus the faith guidelines? Thank you.
I'll go ahead and answer that, Paul. Thank you. Absolutely, yes. And there are many places where a church is the central meeting place in the community. And the most effective way for the government to get into that community and to be of service is through that faith-based community. And when they do that, and you are exceeding the call of your ministry, then yes, you lose the ability to pick and choose. If the government says, here's money, feed people, then you feed everyone who's hungry. If the government says, here's money, clothe people, you clothe everyone who needs it. If it says educate people, you educate everyone who needs it. And I think to pick and choose is not in keeping with true faith or in the services they've agreed to render in behalf of the government.
And with that, the speaker is thanked, as are the questioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, we're actually a little bit more than halfway through. So we always recommend when you're doing Zoom, stand up and stretch. If like me, you're using a virtual background, you may appear to disappear or fade into the waves. But stand up, stretch, move around a little bit. Of course, you're always free to do this at any time during the debate if you wish to. But explicitly offering that opportunity seems to me like a pretty good idea. So now we're going to go to encourage people to do 3-minute speeches. And I commend those who have already given shorter speeches than were allocated to them. That's always commendable behavior. So we have another speaker now on the pro side, Keith Long. Keith, please unmute yourself and give your 3-minute speech or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to give a nod to the chairman for his effort and intent to encourage and invite strong opinions and in a balanced and respectful way. And since I'm speaking directly to you, that seems to be the first thing I wanted to say. Also, to reward you for that, I wanted to note that I'm a journalist, a rare journalist who looks at both sides of an issue and understands both sides and portrays both sides equally fair. One of my principles is to never overlook the obvious. And the obvious on this issue of whether religious rights should be restricted by minority rights or anti-discrimination rights, to put it a different way, invites the obvious conclusion, and that is there's tension in those 2 points. And so there's going to be inevitable the kind of situation that Mr. Stillman referenced. So he asked, I don't know if I can say that or not, but somebody asked, what happens if somebody's religious rights interfere with somebody's civil rights? And what would we say then? And so the answer to me is kind of obvious, and that is that it's not an easy question. There is a tension between the right to exercise your religion, as the First Amendment guarantees, and the right to be fairly treated without being discriminated against or penalized, in effect, because of any of the 9, I believe, protected classes of people: race, sex, gender, on and on. So there's a tension there, and that's part of the world we live in. And I can recall from history books that during Prohibition, there were one of the main tenets of advocacy for prohibition of alcohol was on religious grounds. But that has kind of passed into history, and it's hard to find anybody who would make that argument today. And as Martin Luther King said, the arc of history bends toward justice. And for the speaker who said that, in his opinion, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is out of date, seems to be ignorant. I don't know if I can say that. It seems to be uncognizant of the arc of history that Martin Luther King talked about. In any event, the Supreme Court in the cake baker's case was presented with a situation where Baker, in the exercise of the baker's religion, wanted to assert that he would not deal with a customer or provide services to a customer who was doing anything that his religion didn't approve of. So obviously, in the free exercise of religion guaranteed by the First Amendment, somebody is going to come along and say, well, this person is violating my religion. And in order to protect my right and exercise of my religion, there's certain things that I'm going to do in the way of denial to that person. And I want the courts to.
Can you wrap it up in a couple of sentences, please?
I want the courts to protect my right and as a exercise issue of religion. So it's not it's recognizing, since you cut me off, it's a matter of recognizing that there is a tension and it's not an easy question to answer on its surface. If I had more time, I would cover the other point.
Yeah, thank you. I see a question from Ethan. Ethan, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to reference for the previous speaker a concept espoused by Alana, previous speaker, who talked about the idea of sort of non-discrimination as an overarching sort of umbrella that is not necessarily in conflict with religious liberties in some context. And so I'm wondering if the speaker could comment on whether that theory makes sense to them. And I'd specifically ask if the speaker could talk about, could address this question, not in the context of law, but in the context of morals or opinion. Thanks.
Speaker, please go ahead and answer the question.
Yes, excellent question, Ethan. Thanks for asking. And of course, I, like everybody, I think, was impressed by Alana.
The chair, talk through the chair, please.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I was impressed by, Mr. Chair, by Alana and by Ethan's question. So I don't think it's appropriate to answer the question as Ethan framed it. In other words, I don't think it's appropriate to answer the question in terms of social mores and social values. I think it has to be a legal, and that's why I was not sympathetic to the chair's desire not to raise legal questions after the first speaker based his point of view on that. I think it has to be resolved through the Constitution and the courts, so that an authority that speaks for the community resolves the issue. And so I don't think it's fair to ask somebody, or I don't think it's fair to look to social mores to answer this question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I see we have a question. The name that I see is James and Ann Bartlett or something like that. So two names. Would whoever is there, please, what is your question?
Why, we have what we have, I think, in the country now is a blurring of the interface between religion and politics. There's a trend going about by some politicians in our state of promoting Christian nationalism, and I think there was an article in the New Yorker about this. And I'd just like the speaker, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I should say that first.
Well, no, you're doing fine. You're referencing the speaker in the third person. That's fine. You can do that.
The tendency to have a Christian nationalism. I like your comments when there's a fairly good portion, a base, so to speak, push for this politician who's overzealous and quite charismatic. And if he gets enough of a base where that blurred interface becomes more prominent on the Christian element, and it's a Christian nation, which he proposes that it's going to be a Christian nation because it was ordained by God.
So James, let me nudge you towards, what's the question here?
The question is just I'd like to ask his view on how to face this dilemma when we have politics of Christianity pushing for a Christian nation.
Thank you. Thank you. Would the speaker care to address that question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a fundamental point, and that is that everybody has their alliances and a point of view on this question or these kinds of questions. And those points of view are going to divide themselves up into society on one side or the other, and they need to be resolved legally. They need to be resolved by the court. And just as a note, in the Masterpiece Theater and Masterpiece Bakery case, the court punted, flat out punted, and they decided not to address the question. So, but that's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, the speaker and the questioners are all thanked. And we now move to Jonathan Jenkins. And I am going to get a little bit stricter about time limits. So Jonathan, please make your point succinctly in the 3 minutes allotted or less.
It should be less, guys. I didn't have time today to prepare my speech. Thank you, Sir Chair. I want to start by stating I am a huge supporter of non-discrimination. I myself am in an interracial marriage with a Peruvian woman, so I do not stand for discrimination of any kind. That being said, one of the previous speakers did a great job in explaining the legal side of the argument. I personally stand against the fact that non-discrimination laws should supersede religious freedoms. I think both have merit and both are equally important. The argument I hear is that non-discrimination is more important and that the cake maker should just make the cake. Is that not a form of discrimination against the cake maker? At what point have we as Americans decided that one party is more important or right than another? I am for gay marriage, but in my opinion, I think the cake maker has the right. The couple can always take their business elsewhere as an easy fix and only hurts the couple by taking up a little of their time. The cake baker cannot make changes in his Bible with a Sharpie or move his shop away from the couple. That is unrealistic. Forcing your views on anyone is wrong, and the couple tried to force their views on the cake maker. And when failed, they took them to court. I will not hold a sign or tell people they are wrong because in the Bible, it is not my place to judge. But it is also not someone's right to force me to participate in something I don't believe in or agree with. The cake maker should not have been made or forced to participate. Also, it is not a good thing that the couple did not have the support, is it also not a good thing that the couple did not have to support the business that goes against their views? Ultimately, I think it comes down to the cake. What it comes down to for me is a situation where if the cake maker owns the cake shop and he has made a cake and it is in the window for sale, and the gay couple step into the store and want to purchase that cake, if he declined it, then I would probably be against that. I would think that that is wrong of the cake maker. But if they're asking for a custom made cake from the cake maker and he has to customize it and put work into it that he doesn't agree with, I think at that point it is wrong. Both are equally important. Both should equally be measured. One should not be considered more important. That is my speech.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I'm looking for questioners. And I see Joe Pratt. Joe, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, the speaker laid out a scenario that seems like would get into some really fine points of interpretation in commerce. So my question is, if business is open for commerce, such as businesses that had lunch counters in the 1960s who might have declined service to Blacks or interracial couples, if you're open for commerce, are you not open for commerce to all comers?
Would the speaker care to answer that question?
Of the questioner, I feel that I did ask or answer that question because I said that in that situation where the cake maker has a cake already prepared for sale to anyone, if they were to step in the store and he just, no, you can't buy that cake, you need to step out, I would be against that and I find that wrong. But to force someone, because he's already made this, he made it for anyone, so anyone can buy it. But if you come to the cake maker and say, I want you to make this, well, I don't agree with that and I don't want to make that. So at that point, I feel that it is the cake maker's right to refuse to make that cake. If the cake is already made for sale to all, they should be able to buy it. If not, I'm on the cake maker's side.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, the speaker is thanked, as the questioners. And so now, now a lot of people at this point have expressed a desire to speak. And again, not that I have anything against legal arguments. I mean, that's how things end up getting decided. But the nature of these debates is we look more for personal truth. So I'm going to nudge in that direction, not command, but only nudge in the direction of getting more towards personal truth. And Ryan Majumbi, and I'm cutting things down to 2 minutes. So please do try to be concise.
Understood.
Ryan, would you like to go ahead?
Yep, I can hear you. When I think about basically this resolution, non-discrimination laws should take precedence over religious liberty, I think of just kind of like, with what I've learned so far in my undergraduate, just about the concept of religion, beliefs, practices, etc., what it ultimately comes down to me is just like, we're saying religious liberty like everything fits under this umbrella. But the fact is that religions are internally diverse in many different ways. One Christian who says that I will not serve a gay person, another Christian I will marry you. One religion over there is like, we have no problem with gay people or trans people. Another religion over here is like, well, we kind of have an issue. So for me, the issue is more just kind of like, which religion gets to decide this, what's supposed to be higher than civil rights and what is supposed to be lower than civil rights. That's the issue I run into when it comes to this. Ultimately speaking, I do believe that people shouldn't be forced to do something against their conscience, against their will. That is their right. However, I don't think that that right should be enforced or hurt someone else. After all, I mean, how you slice it, we're in a democracy, and if we're to live in a society with a pluralism of religions, then we need something to exist outside of those religions, something that doesn't take sides, something that doesn't care what those things believe, and be able to say everyone needs to be treated equally, healthcare, housing, etc. And yeah, that's basically all I have to say.
Beautifully done, and in less than the allocated time, for which I will give you personal kudos. So now we're going to switch to only one question per speaker in order to keep things moving and give everyone a chance. I see, I may mispronounce this name, but Deidre, please ask your question.
Hi there, nice to see everybody. And this is my opinion is, I think a lot of what's happening in the cake baker issue is the cake baker, I believe, feels like that would be endorsing something he doesn't believe in, correct? And so I think that it's probably logical to think on the other side that what they want is acceptance. They want to be accepted. And so I don't necessarily see a rejection of making a cake for them as a rejection of them as human beings. So that's kind of it.
Well, okay, what's the question?
There's no question, I'm sorry.
Oh, doggone it, and I let you get away with that, didn't I?
I may be doing it wrong, I apologize.
Well, you got that one by me. Kudos for getting one by the chair. Since that wasn't really a question, I'm going to go to Mimi Yang. Please ask your question, Mimi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is towards the last speaker, if talking about internal diverse as opposed to external diverse. So religion, I totally agree, it's an internal matter. So internal feelings, traditions over thousands of years making up. What happens in law is intended to govern, regulate your external behaviors. So when then the two different religions come together or different sets of values come together, how can law govern your internal feelings, your internal inherited traditions. So Mr. Chair, my question is to someone who understands the law, how the law can govern your internal feelings.
Okay, thank you. Would the current speaker like to take a shot at that question?
I would. I guess I should have been clearer with what I meant by internal and external. When I meant by internally diverse, I didn't mean like feelings or thoughts. I meant like, let's take Judaism, for example. In Judaism, there are like 4 different sects I can think of, like Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, and Kabbalah, but that's not really a sect, it's more of a philosophy. But anywho, there's like 4 different types that you can fall into. Even in those 4 different types, there are different people who have different values, and 2 people of the same sect, of the same religion, of the same whatever, can walk away from this debate right here on the pro side of the resolution or the con side of the resolution. And so I agree, the government can't regulate people's internal feelings, which is why I think that it's impossible to truly be like religious liberty supersedes non-discrimination, because, well, in order to do that, you have to kind of choose a religion to supersede, because if every religion has different beliefs, if every religion has different practices and different opinions, especially on this issue, then who is to decide whether we take Buddhism's stance on gay people or Taoism's stance on gay people? So that's my issue when it comes to this debate on which religion essentially gets to choose it. And so if it's an issue of which religions get to choose it, then I feel like it should just be left to non-discrimination laws because they're unbiased towards anyone's religion or identity.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, the speaker and questioner are thanked. And we will now go to someone on the con side, Pamela Regenton. Please give your speech, 2 minutes or less.
Thank you so much, Chair. I have been waiting anxiously for my turn because I am a wedding cake maker, and I was thrust into the media spotlight when I declined to make a cake for a lesbian couple 8 years ago. And I hope that I can bring up some remarks here that will make people understand a little bit better my perspective as a wedding professional. I believe that the anti-discrimination laws are themselves discriminatory. They create special classes of people with special rights, when under the Constitution and the First Amendment, we're all given the same rights equally. We're not given the rights, but our rights are protected under the First Amendment equally. But under the special classes, some of us are left out. And I personally experienced the effect of that when I declined to participate in an event. I firmly believe in that the definition of marriage as practiced over time and cultures is one man and one woman with the potential to produce children. And the state's only interest in marriage is to protect children. It's not to endorse romantic relationships. So when I declined to make the cake, I was not discriminating against individuals, but I was simply declining to use my time and talents to endorse a message that was against my core beliefs about marriage. We should all be concerned about government compelling speech or expression and forcing us to do things that we do not want to do. Now, there are some points that I would really like to bring up that I hope cause people to think that haven't been brought up. Objections to anti-discrimination laws are not merely religious opinions, but there are many moral truths or objective truths that should be important to all of us, such as the rights of children. Children have the natural right to their mother and their father, their biological mother and father. We should also be concerned about their safety in shelters or locker rooms. We should also care about scientific integrity and the loss of objective biological truths. And we should also be concerned about the cultural sustainability in the long term for the way these policies are dictated by special rights of special groups.
Well,
Thank
Pamela,
you so much.
Pamela, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to wrap it up.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I think that was courageous for you to make that speech. That's how I perceive it. And so, but I'm sticking to the format here. And so I'm looking for one question. And I see Susan King, Cope. Would you like to ask your question, please? Susan, you're muted, or we're not hearing you. Okay, sorry, this happens sometimes for whatever reason. Sean Kessler, please ask your question.
Mr. Chair, what special classes does the speaker feel that non-discrimination laws create?
Would the speaker care to address that?
Someone said before earlier that there's 9 special classes under these laws, right?
Okay, I think you asked and answered. So I'm now going on to another speaker who is on the pro side. And again, but remember, I am enforcing this 2-minute limit. So please keep that in mind. Ethan Abelman, please give your 2-minute or less speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll actually pass if you have another one who much of what I've said, much of what I wanted to say has been said by others. So if you have another pro speaker, they can go ahead.
One of the most generous offers I've ever heard, and it's actually the first time this has ever happened when I've ever chaired a debate. Mary Roach, would you like to give a speech in the pro side?
Yes, please. And 60 miles of where I grew up, we were Ruggies, and all related.
Sorry, I mispronounced your name.
No worries. There are some points that I think relate to what have been addressed but not covered. One is that religion is one of the core elements of the non-discrimination legislation laws that we have, in addition to the others that we might think of. So to me, it's not an either or kind of proposition. I think that within places of worship, as long as one's not, there are laws that limit some activity within places of worship, and I mean mosques, temples, churches, the range that some folks have talked about. And I think that's covered. I think that once someone enters the public marketplace in the United States of America, the commercial public marketplace, then there is at the minimum a moral obligation to think about those key areas that our country has identified as for people with less have been discriminated against, which is why the laws have been enacted, in my understanding, that there becomes that that requirement to work as an organizational actor rather than individual. As an organizational actor, a cake owner, and I appreciate the woman who spoke before about her personal experience with that. I'm thinking of the Supreme Court decision around Hobby Lobby, that people then no longer act as individuals in their own personal beliefs. They become public actors, not necessarily government actors. And within that, there is an obligation to understand and be conscious of and address issues of power and misuse of power that go beyond what some might consider some of the core tenets of capitalism or whatever we might consider that to be. So that's my thinking. Individuals, when they go to become organizational representatives, need to step back and live their own lives, but not require other folks. I think also in terms of the cake example for specifically, that once one restricts somebody from taking advantage of their own customizable key part of their service, that becomes an issue for me. Thank you.
Thank you. The speaker is thanked. And I'm looking for a question. And also, I would like to say, if your voice has not been heard in the room yet, I would really strongly encourage you to ask a question or to sign up to ask a question. You could also sign up as a speaker, although I don't know if anybody who signs up as a speaker now is going to get up or not. I can't be quite sure, but looking for new voices. And based on that, I see that Alan Lutz has his hand up to ask a question. Alan, what is your question, please?
Hi, well, I have a statement and a question. Statement is that the topics are not black and white or not as in race, but in all one extreme or the other. The question is, if a baker can be forced to make any cake, then can you force a dancer to dance nude or a singer to sing songs that he or she considers obscene?
Thank you. Very clear question. Very beautifully phrased. Would the speaker like to take a shot at that?
Yes, I think that's where it hinges for me on those key areas that we have understood, and there's data that has shown up and currently, not just historically, that individuals have been discriminated on based on race, color, religion, sex, pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, age, disability, genetic information. Then I think those categories it behooves us as citizens to understand that there is a distinct difference there between someone who is a dancer, there could be sexual discrimination there depending on what the dancer's circumstances are. But in terms of other areas of forcing, I think it becomes part of larger citizenship, larger understanding of who we are and choose to be as Americans. Thank you.
And with that, the speaker and questioner are thanked. I would ask that if you have your hand raised for something that we've already bypassed, please lower your hand. And we are now taking a speaker in the negative. Stephanie, please give your speech in 2 minutes or less. And is Stephanie still there? Another few seconds to see. Well, that's too bad. That one sounded like a good speech. Sam, are you ready and prepared to give your speech?
Okay, now I think it's muted.
Okay, Stephanie.
Still in technology.
Okay, Stephanie, please give
Yes, am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Okay, all right. I'm an artist and I take commissions from people, but I take the commissions that I want to take. It is in fact up to me as an artistic person to decide that. And it has nothing to do with anyone's race, religion, color, sexual orientation, or anything else. As a creative person, that is in fact up to me. And when I see people basically harassing and picking on Christians and or Muslims who also don't want to bake cakes that are specially decorated for various genders, it's just plain rude. There are thousands of bakers and venues and places that you can go and get what you want done. There are people who will bake you a wedding cake for you and your pet dog. You don't need to harass Christians or anyone else who simply says, look, I would really rather not take that commission. Can you go somewhere else, please? I have lots of artwork that I'll sell to anyone. But if somebody says to me, I want you to make this particular thing for me, and I go, you know, that's not something I do. However, I know someone who will probably do it for you. And that is up to me. And the government has no business telling me what to do as far as that goes. So that's why I'm against this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Very clearly stated. And I'm looking for a question for this speaker. And Larry Noel, please ask your question.
My question, Mr. Speaker, is does she believe that people sometimes cry racism, homophobia, xenophobia in describing someone when they get an unfavorable response to one of their requests, because they know that that's going to get the attention and bring on the pressure to maybe change the situation?
Speaker, would you like to answer that question?
Sure. Yeah, I would say certainly we've all seen plenty of crybabies that scream and yell that they're being discriminated against, when it's simply a case that, look, I don't do that. Go find someone else. There are thousands of people who can take care of you. You don't need to harass somebody who doesn't want to do it. Thank you.
And with that, the speaker and questioner are thanked. And we will now go to somebody else in the affirmative. This may be somewhat nuanced. Dale Williams, please give your speech of 2 minutes or less.
Hi, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't mean to belabor the cake decorating example, because I know that there are plenty of other areas where there's a real conflict between somebody's civil rights versus somebody's religious rights. I'd like to think they would all be the same, but we're all very different. And when I first heard, and Pam, I'm sorry, and I'm glad you joined us, and I admire your bravery. I will admit, when I first heard about the cake baker issue, I thought, oh great, another self-righteous Christian who's unloving and judgmental, and my immediate reaction was negative. But I think, to Jonathan's point and a few other people's points, the artist who just spoke, I started thinking, well, what if I were a baker and someone came in and said, I want you to decorate a cake for me that's about sadomasochism or violence or abuse of children, something that outrageous, that I was just like, no, I can't do that. I think it comes down, and I don't think I should have the obligation to do for them what they're asking for. But I do think, as a Christian, I think we need to focus more and move the country more toward just honest, humble dialogue that's not name calling, that's not judgmental, that is as loving as it possibly can be, that I think, to some people have already mentioned, counseling them about using someone else or making a referral. So I honestly thought I was going to be pro the resolution, but I guess I just told myself that I am against the resolution. But we need more love and more kindness and more consideration. That's the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you. And I think occasionally we witness miracles in Braver Angels of people actually changing their minds in the middle of a debate. Of course, now I got to put you in the con column and I got to look for somebody else in the pro column. But that's my problem. And I'm looking for somebody to ask a question, and looking for somebody new. And I see Tracy Fisher. Please ask your question.
Okay, it's true confessions. You inspired me. Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman, the speaker inspired me. I'm so confused. I heard I am for non-discrimination. I listened to the baker tonight, and I was also changed. I'm a public official where I am. I'm really for humanity. I'm a 40-year Republican. I will admit that. I'm also an artist, so I've been very inspired tonight. And I guess my question would be, how much of this debate is really driven by the press?
And
Question.
by the way, you did a beautiful job of seeing how long you could go on before I would force you to ask the question. You got it just right. Would the speaker like to address that question, please?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know, and I'm increasingly annoyed with the media and the hyping, but I'm also really annoyed with the bipartisan duking it out all the time and blame and all of that stuff. So I guess my response is yes and yes. I think it's private citizens, it's politicians, it's media, it's whoever decides they just want to hate and call names rather than have a peaceful, braver angels, honest, humble, and loving discussion. And I think that's what we're all here for. So yeah, I agree that it's driven by the media partly, but I don't think they're the only ones to blame.
Thank you. With that, the speaker and the questioner are thanked. So I have somebody else. So this is a person who says they are against the resolution, but they also say they're nuanced. So you never know. Maybe this person is going to switch sides, or maybe not. Danielle Crone, please give your 2 minutes or less speech.
Hi. Yes, I'm very glad that we moved into the art question. I'm a musician, and I just wanted to tell a personal story to illustrate what happened to me and why I'm struggling with this whole issue. And I haven't chosen a side. Sometimes I play music that references Christian religion, and sometimes I play secular music. I was invited to an art show to play, and then I found out later that the people that could play in this public art show were not allowed to play or sell anything that had a religious reference. And I was very confused about this. I'd never actually seen this as a requirement in any art show, and I've been doing these for quite some time. And I was just trying to imagine if that meant that if someone were selling, Buddhist statues, they couldn't sell them, or if someone painted pictures and represented a mosque or a temple, or what would that, how is that stepping on our freedom to express our beliefs in a public space? And my feeling is it, if I am sharing music that has a religious reference, am I forcing people to listen to it? If I have a booth and it has paintings, that have religious image, am I forcing someone to come and look at them? I'm not understanding. So I'm moving this into how I feel about the difference between the artists talking about their private commissions and a public space, and sharing our religious views in a public space, because I do this often and I'm not paid. I don't ask for money. I play. And so it's not like I'm selling something or forcing something. I don't feel that I am. So I'm just bringing this up as something that I've been thinking about during this discussion, not as a point of view necessarily. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And so looking for a questioner for this speaker. Kevin, I don't see any new people, so I think you got it. What's your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Chair, so the question I have for the speaker is whether she felt her civil liberties or religious liberties were being infringed on in that moment.
That is a very good question. I felt like my religious liberties were my freedom to express my religious beliefs in a public space without preaching, just playing.
And so with that, the speaker and questioner are thanked. We're coming right down to the wire here. I'm going to try to get in a few 1-minute speeches with no questions. And I realize I apologize, only giving a minute, but Want to get some more voices in. Sam, would you like to take a shot at saying what you have to say in 1 minute?
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Gosh, I hope I can figure something out. My family fled the Ukraine in the 30s. They were asked to bake a cake that depicted Stalin and Hitler getting married, and they had to get out of there. And that relationship didn't work out, as we all know. I grew up and got highlighted repeatedly by well-meaning adults as the Jew in the room. And almost always some fraction of the kids in the school would turn and look at me like, who the hell is that? And what's this? Why does this matter? Why do I have to care? And it never helped me. It was never positive. And it sort of instilled in me a chip on my shoulder that took me to get a history degree when I was in my 20s. And what I found in history was that, you can't win for losing. The Germans used the law in the name of protecting the broad German populace from these evil small group of people called the Jews. They're part of a bizarre cult, that wants to hurt everyone else. It's always in the name of protection. It doesn't matter that, that you want to protect people from discrimination. The law is a tool. Oh dear. Can I just taper off with the other side of this? The Tsar in 1905 declared freedom of religion, and it provoked pogroms that murdered hundreds of Jews. If the mob doesn't want you there, there's no law that protects you. This is about what society feels. The end.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I deeply apologize for having to give you the marimba sound. Chuck Cosson, would you like to make a 1 minute speech? And you can pass if I'm not giving you enough time.
No, thank you very much. First, thanks to all the participants for their civil and constructive perspectives on this. Second, one of the arguments against the proposition is that the law does not police beliefs. And if we allow the publication of things like white supremacist literature, then certainly we can allow people to hold and express beliefs about people in same-sex relationships. The argument for the proposition, though, is consider the scenario in which the affordance that the discrimination laws are protecting is not a cake, but it is medical care. Or we subject religious institutions to laws against unsolicited marketing. So you don't get to just email people at random your religious beliefs. So if the non-discrimination laws or if religious beliefs have to give way to non-discrimination laws in those cases, why would anybody support the general proposition to the contrary? Thanks.
Thank you. And right on the money. Mark Zenner, would you like to make a 1 minute speech?
Yes, thank you, Chair. 3 very quick points. One, I think we can all agree in a perfect world, we would all have tolerance, we would all have non-discrimination. That's a wonderful goal. We do not live in a perfect world. Each and every one of us has our biases, our hates, our bigotry. The law is a very crude weapon. It's a one-size-fits-all, and the cops with guns drawn will be marching into your door and arresting you if you don't follow the rules of the law. Sam, an earlier speaker, made a very cogent point. Often these things boomerang. I wonder whether Trump would have won his first election, but for the social divisions driven by the master cake case. Think through the reaction, not just what you want things to play out as. They seldom play out the way you intend. And finally, lots of people are driven by their honest Christian or religious beliefs in doing whatever they're doing. How many doctors are doctors precisely because they're trying to help humanity? It's a form, it's a way of showing their faith. To turn to that same doctor and say, you must provide genital mutilation to a 16-year-old child because that child thinks they're in the wrong body. I'm sorry, I'm voting with the doctor each and every time. If that doctor is there trying to help, to cure, first do no harm.
Mark, thank you. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I think I'm going to be able to get in almost everybody. I was supposed to close this, I think, a couple of minutes ago, but I like pushing envelopes sometimes. Judy Reutman, would you like to make a 1-minute speech?
Yes, thank you. I'm very sorry that this discussion has focused so much on the arts, because I don't think that that's really the point. I think when Alana talked about housing, when you talk about corporations not providing insurance for certain kinds of medical care, when you that's really the really urgent issue. The issue of the arts is more nuanced. So I want to get to the more major issue. I'm also a Jew. You might have noticed that most of the Jews have a certain kind of attitude, and there's historical reasons for that. As Sam just said, I have been historically demonized by other people's religious beliefs. And the question is, how do you draw a line which allows you to discriminate against some people and not about others? And the answer that I come to is there is no such line. You just simply cannot discriminate because you cannot draw a line. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
You got that down to the second.
I thought early.
Larry Noel, would you like to give your 1-minute speech?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to just call this, my house, my rules. So when we're talking about like Hobby Lobby, and somebody mentioned that hey, they're one of those businesses that have used their religious convictions in forming their policies. And like the artist that spoke earlier, are they going to be then next forced to sell things that they don't want to sell? Just like a cake, going back to the cake maker. And it's like my son, we don't drink and I don't want alcohol in our house. And when he came over and he brought his alcohol with him, I said, you can't do that. It's my house, it's my rules. And I think, business or a church or any other, whether it's in the public arena or not, unless it's government, should be able to set its own rules and ask people to adhere to them.
Interesting.
Forgot to unmute myself. Thank you. Last will be Lynn Huber.
Okay, and I will not take a full minute. I just want to say I am much more concerned about the issues of women's health care than I am about cakes. And the conflict, particularly between the Roman Catholic churches and hospitals and women who need abortions. There are a lot of places in this country where abortion services are very rare, and sometimes the only medical service is run by a church. And I understand the conflict and I respect the conflict, but I think if you offer a public service, then you must offer whatever is needed and appropriate medically without regard to your own personal preferences. Thank you.
Thank you. And huge thanks to everyone who spoke, everyone who asked a question, and everybody who just was here. Thanks to all of you. So now the speech part of the, oh, actually, that's right. I forgot something I was supposed to do. I am looking for a motion to adjourn. We're actually going to do this parliamentary style. I want to, can somebody give me a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion to
Is there a
adjourn. Second.
So we are adjourned, but don't go away. That's just the debate part that's over. There's a few more minutes. I would like to ask you to use the chat to share anything, hopefully brief, about anything you enjoyed or you learned from this debate. So use the chat. And if you'd like to share something verbally, I'm going to call on a couple of people to just share verbally anything again. So something that you enjoyed or something you learned. Chat gives everybody a chance. But anybody like to actually be maybe the last person or two people to get their voice in the room? Looking for raised hands. And I see Phil.
Yeah, I think this just shows that people are a lot more open to listening to than they are to shouting. And this is just a great way to bring that polarity down and get people on the same page. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Jody, would you like to share something?
Yes, I really appreciated the opportunity to mature my own thoughts and feelings. And as I listened to, the purposeful, conscious articulated thoughts of others, it really helped me better articulate and understand my own position and my own values around the issue. So I really appreciated that.
Thank you. Thank you. And Susan Sandoval, would you like to share something?
Yes, I would. Let me get my camera on. Okay. I wanted to echo what the previous folks have said about hearing two distinct viewpoints and articulated very maturely, and people not talking over each other. And you did an excellent job moderating, keeping 2 minutes, like in reality when you have debates, and getting everybody to be very direct with their and to the point. So thank you so much for hosting this. Appreciate it. And thank you for all for sharing.
It's always our pleasure. And it's our pleasure. And we learned from, we stand on the shoulders of giants, one of whom is named April Lawson. And that may be enough of my voice. Cliff, would you like to close this out?
Sure. Thanks, Paul. I'll echo what many people are saying, which is that you did a great job, and I also just I've been a volunteer with Braver Angels for almost 5 years now, and I got involved shortly after the 2016 election when tensions were high, and it seemed like we didn't need to be as divided and polarized as we were, and the Braver Angels mission to depolarize America seems as relevant today as it did when I first got involved, because I think that it's a rare experience to be able to get together with kind of fellow citizens across all these divides, where you have people here from not only all over the country geographically, but different ethnic and racial and socioeconomic backgrounds and gender identities, and to be able to sit down and talk about something that really matters, and to be able to do that respectfully, and to understand that we have different points of view, but that's okay. And in having those different points of view, we can actually talk to each other, discover common ground, and each come away a little bit improved by that experience. I find that magical, and I get the sense that many of us have that same kind of experience here. And so I just wanted to say that I really appreciate everybody here, that you keep me coming back, and I also wanted to kind of put in a plug for some of the other things that Braver Angels do. We do different kinds of workshops that help people develop skills that are targeted at bridging the divide in different ways. We do discussions of workshops where we try to dig deeper to articulate common ground, so that can be used in our local communities, and perhaps with legislators or leaders of different kinds to help make progress. We have a whole bunch of programs, and I don't want to go through all of them, but I would like to, if one of the other whips could drop the website into the chat box, I'd encourage everybody to maybe take a look. I also wanted to invite everyone to our next national debate, which is on May 25th. And this topic is about voting in America. And one of the things I really appreciated about tonight and discussing anti-discrimination and religious liberty is it's a concept that's at the root of our country. It's at the root of our experiment, and as is democracy, as is the ability for us to make collective decisions in a fair and meaningful way. So if you'd like to join us for the debate, I think the resolution is pass HR 1. I mean, we are, as an organization, really committed to having a balance between a variety of perspectives. We call that red and blue, but it can be applied to many different ways that we see the world. So I wanted to invite you to visit our website, to join us for the next debate, and I'll pop a link again. If one of the whips could copy that link out of the chat, we'll put it in there. And there's also a follow-up email that you'll all get. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that there's a really cool website called thehustings.news, the HUSTINGS.news, and they actually cover these debates and they write them up and they cover the different points of view that people had, and they give folks a chance to kind of go back and reflect on what was said, and that leaves kind of a lasting record of the insights that you all shared tonight. So that's it. Please come back, join us for other Braver Angels events. Thank you, everyone, and I really look forward to seeing you all again soon as we tackle the next tough issue. So with that, I think it's time to say goodnight, and we're going to put on a little music. And everybody, if you like, feel free to dance your way out of the room. This is a wonderful song that was written by a Braver Angel. It is actually two Braver Angels. The name of the song is A United State of Humanity, and it's by Donna Elaine Miller and John Baker. And here we go.
It's not black, it's not white, it's not wrong, it's not right, it's not red, it's not blue, it's just me and you. It's not rich, it's not poor, somewhere in the middle is the open door. If our points of view don't quite see eye to eye, well, that's all the more reason why we need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity, the sum of every part. Need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. Resolutions in a revolution of the heart. We're living in a great divide. This fear of each other is our suicide. I believe love's gonna keep us alive, but only if we decide. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity, the sum of every part. Need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. Resolutions in a revolution of the heart. It's not just the conversation, it's the listening. It takes every voice feeling heard to let freedom ring. We can solve our future, heal our history, sting, step toward our common ground, spread our better age of wings. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. A United States of humanity, the sum of every part. We need a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. Resolution is a revolution of the heart. Oh, we hold this truth to be self-evident. I have a dream, a United States of humanity. We need it, we need it. We hold this truth to be self-evident. I have a dream, a United revolution of resolutions in a revolution of revolutions in a revolution of the heart. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
That was fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Good night, all.
Good night, Paul.
Good night. Thanks for